My best friend faked her death and abandoned her toddler with me, only to return 18 years later demanding insurance money. She called me just the babysitter, but last week she was sentenced to prison in an orange jumpsuit that matched her spray tan. The moment my closest friend, Izzy, appeared at my apartment with a 3-year-old and a stack of medical reports, I understood my existence was poised for a significant shift. She had always possessed a flair for the dramatic, often elevating a minor cut to a grave medical crisis. Yet, this time, her voice faltered as she spoke. It's cancer. Aggressive. Physicians estimate 6 months at most. I gazed at the documents, test results I couldn't decipher. Her daughter, Jenny, sat quietly on my sofa, munching on cheese crackers and engrossed in cartoons. I need you to adopt her, Izzy stated, not as a request. Her father is gone, and my parents have passed away. You are all she has left. I yearned to decline. I was 28, unattached, and held a demanding position at a marketing agency. However, Izzy had been my university roommate and the nearest thing I had to a sibling, so I agreed. The adoption process unfolded rapidly. Izzy's health declined more swiftly than anticipated. She extracted a promise from me, never to disclose to Jenny the true severity of her illness. Let her believe I loved her enough to ensure her well-being, she murmured from her hospice bed. She had already established a $2 million life insurance policy, designating Jenny as the beneficiary, to be held in trust until she reached 21. For her future, Izzy whispered. 3 weeks later, she was gone. The casket remained closed. The disease had ravaged her body too extensively for a viewing. Raising Jenny proved more challenging than I had envisioned. She was plagued by constant nightmares, waking up screaming for her mother, and I would comfort her until she drifted back to sleep. I sacrificed career advancements to be present for school pickups. I ceased dating because Jenny required stability. When she was 11, she inquired why her biological mother had departed. I explained that Izzy loved her profoundly and had ensured she would always be cared for. Jenny remained unconvinced. If she loved me, she would have remained, she asserted. The adolescent years were arduous. At 15, following a particularly severe identity crisis, Jenny attempted to end her life. I depleted all my savings on therapy and treatment. I sold my vehicle to finance a specialized program. My employer threatened termination due to my frequent absences, but I was indifferent. Jenny needed me. Gradually, painstakingly, we navigated her trauma together. When she was 17, she addressed me as Mom for the first time, intentionally. Thanks, Mom, she said after I collected her from school. I wept throughout the entire drive home. By the time Jenny reached 20, we had constructed a genuine life together. She was a pre-med student at Columbia University, attending on a full scholarship. She had been discreetly accumulating funds from her part-time employment to purchase a car for me, knowing I had sold mine for her treatment. You relinquished everything for me, she stated. I wished to reciprocate. She also had plans for the insurance funds. She intended to establish a foundation for children who had lost parents to cancer. Perhaps some good can emerge from the adversity, she mused. That's when peculiar occurrences began. Fresh flowers appeared on Izzy's grave, which I had not placed. Jenny received an anonymous birthday card that read, "Almost time, sweetheart." I glimpsed a woman at Jenny's graduation who bore an uncanny resemblance to Izzy, but she vanished before I could approach. A private investigator began contacting me, inquiring about Izzy's demise and the insurance policy. He claimed he was hired to locate beneficiaries. My intuition signaled that something was amiss. The week before Jenny's 21st birthday, as I prepared her favorite lasagna, the doorbell chimed. I opened it and nearly collapsed. Izzy stood there, undeniably alive, accompanied by a man in an expensive suit. "Hello, dearest friend," she greeted, with her characteristic dramatic flourish. "I'm here for what is rightfully mine." My mind struggled to comprehend the sight. Izzy elucidated everything as casually as if recounting her day. She had bribed a hospice worker to falsify the death certificate. She had been residing in Costa Rica under an assumed identity. She had been observing us through Jenny's social media for years, awaiting this precise moment. The man was her legal counsel. He presented me with documents asserting the adoption was executed under fraudulent pretenses. "You cannot do this," I uttered, my hands trembling. Jenny entered the room and froze. She regarded Izzy as if she were a stranger. "Who is this?" she asked me. Izzy's expression fell. "I am your mother, darling. I gave birth to you." Jenny shook her head. "No, she is my mother." She gestured towards me. "She is the one who remained." Izzy lost her composure, then shrieked about sacrifices and her need for the money because her affluent husband had passed away, leaving substantial debts. She threatened to have me arrested for insurance fraud if I did not cooperate. Jenny remained composed, remarkably so. She walked to her room and returned with a manila folder. Actually, Jenny began, there's something intriguing about biological parents who abandon their offspring and commit fraud. Izzy's face turned ashen. Jenny smiled, and it was not a pleasant smile. I have known you were alive for 3 years, and I have been preparing. She produced documents, photographs, and bank statements. I engaged my own investigator when I turned 18. I uncovered your fabricated death, your financial obligations, and your new identity in Costa Rica. She spread the papers across the coffee table. I also discovered the insurance fraud charges pending against Maria Gonzalez. That's you, isn't it? Izzy lunged for the papers, but Jenny was swifter. She stepped back, clutching the folder tightly. The lawyer attempted to intervene, but I obstructed his path. My heart pounded, yet I held my ground. You cannot prove anything, Izzy hissed, her meticulously manicured nails digging into her palms. That money is mine. I paid the premiums. Jenny retrieved her phone and played a recording. Izzy's voice filled the room, discussing faked death certificates and bribing officials. The timestamp indicated it was from 2 weeks prior. Izzy's face drained of color. How did you? Izzy began. Your lawyer speaks too loudly at airport bars, Jenny interjected. She turned to the lawyer. Incidentally, the Florida Bar Association would be quite interested in your involvement in insurance fraud. The lawyer seized his briefcase and headed for the exit. I was never here, he muttered before vanishing down the corridor. Izzy's composure shattered. She began to weep, but they were not genuine tears. I had witnessed her feigned crying enough times in college to discern the difference. Jenny, sweetheart, I am your mother. I gave you life. No, Jenny countered, her voice unwavering. You gave birth to me. There is a distinction. She gave me life. She gestured towards me. She relinquished her career, her savings, her everything. You surrendered nothing. I watched my daughter stand resolute against the woman who had forsaken her. Pride surged within my chest. This was not the shattered teenager who had attempted to end her life. This was a formidable young woman who recognized her intrinsic worth. Izzy altered her strategy. She pulled out her phone and began scrolling. I possess photographs of you growing up. I observed every milestone through social media. Does that not count for something? You watch me contend with abandonment issues through a screen while sipping cocktails on a beach, Jenny retorted. You watched her sell her automobile to finance my therapy. You watched her forego promotions to attend my school events. You watched, but you never offered assistance. The veracity of Jenny's words resonated deeply. All those years of hardship, and Izzy had been reveling in Costa Rica. My hands clenched into fists. Izzy's fabricated tears evaporated, her expression hardening. Fine, we will proceed the difficult way. I will dispute the adoption. I will demonstrate it was conducted under false pretenses. I will take both of you to court. With what funds? Jenny inquired. According to my investigator, you are penniless. Your husband's creditors are closing in. That is why you are here. Izzy's mouth opened and closed like a fish. She had not anticipated Jenny possessing such extensive knowledge. Neither had I. Frankly, my daughter had been orchestrating this for years. The insurance company is aware of the fraud, Jenny continued. I sent them the evidence 3 months ago. They are investigating. That money you are depending on, it is frozen. Izzy stumbled backward, her designer heels catching on the rug, forcing her to grasp the wall for support. You little sorceress, she snarled. You ruined everything. No, I interjected, finding my voice. You ruined everything 18 years ago when you prioritized money over your child. Izzy turned on me. You were always envious of me. In college, you coveted what I possessed. My appearance, my partners, my life, so you stole my daughter. I rescued your daughter. I corrected. From a life of questioning why she was insufficient for her own mother to remain. Jenny moved to stand beside me. She slipped her hand into mine and squeezed it. We are finished here, she declared to Izzy. You need to depart. Izzy remained motionless. This is not over. I will discover a means to acquire that money. Actually, it is over, Jenny stated. She produced one more document. This is a restraining order. Approach us again, and you will be apprehended. And just so you are aware, the Costa Rican authorities are quite interested in Maria Gonzalez's true identity. Izzy's bravado finally dissolved. She glanced between us, searching for any fissure in our unified front. Finding none, she snatched her purse and headed for the door. She paused at the threshold. I loved you, Jenny, she said softly. In my own fashion. Your fashion was inadequate, Jenny replied. It never was. Izzy left without another utterance. We heard her heels clicking down the hallway, their sound diminishing until they disappeared entirely. Jenny and I stood there in silence, still holding hands. Finally, Jenny turned to me. I apologize for not informing you that I knew. I wished to shield you from her as much as you protected me. I drew her into an embrace. How long have you truly known? Since I was 17. I discovered some old papers in the attic and began investigating. The more I uncovered, the angrier I became. But then I realized something. She pulled back to look at me. I already had a genuine mother. I did not require her. We settled onto the sofa, the same one where a 3-year-old Jenny had consumed cheese crackers all those years ago. There is something about Jenny's 3-year investigation that makes me ponder what else she knows that she is not yet disclosing. She recounted hiring the investigator with funds from her employment, tracking Izzy's online activities, and preparing for this day. I knew she would return when the money became accessible, Jenny remarked. Individuals like her always do. I reflected on all the sacrifices over the years, the promotions I had declined, the relationships I had ended because they failed to comprehend my commitment to Jenny, the savings I had depleted. Gazing at the strong, intelligent woman beside me, I knew I would endure it all again. What happens now? I inquired. Now we live our lives, Jenny responded. The insurance money will remain frozen during the investigation, but I am unconcerned. I never desired it anyway. She smiled. I possess everything I require. The subsequent days were fraught with tension. We continually anticipated Izzy's reappearance, but she did not. Jenny's investigator reported that Izzy had fled back to Costa Rica, likely to evade authorities. The insurance company expressed gratitude to Jenny for the information and assured her the fraud would be prosecuted. A week after Izzy's visit, as we dined, Jenny produced a wrapped box. An early birthday gift, she announced. Inside was a photo album. The first image depicted me holding a 3-year-old Jenny at the adoption ceremony. We appeared terrified but resolute. The album chronicled our journey. First days of school, science fair projects, therapy sessions, graduation. The final photograph was from the previous week, both of us in the kitchen preparing lasagna, laughing at something I could no longer recall. This is our narrative, Jenny asserted. The authentic one, not the one she attempted to compose. I leafed through the pages again, observing our shared life laid out in photographs. The difficult periods were also present. Pictures from the hospital after Jenny's attempt, both of us looking exhausted and frightened. But even in those bleak moments, we were together. Thank you, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Thank you, Jenny countered. For choosing me when you were not obligated to. For persevering when circumstances became challenging. For being my mother when my biological parent could not be bothered. The birthday party preparations became our new routine. I spent the following morning contacting bakeries while Jenny organized old photographs for a memory board. We worked side by side in comfortable silence, both feigning that the threat of Izzy had dissipated. Yet I observed Jenny constantly checking her phone, how she glanced at the door whenever footsteps echoed in the hallway. 3 days before her 21st birthday, Jenny returned home from class looking pale. She dropped her backpack and sank onto the sofa. I abandoned the decorations I had been hanging and sat beside her. She displayed her phone, multiple missed calls from unknown numbers, text messages from individuals claiming to be old acquaintances of Izzy's. Each one referenced the insurance money. Each one presented a different rationale for why Izzy deserved it. The pressure campaign had commenced. I took the phone and scrolled through the messages. Some resorted to emotional appeals, discussing Izzy's hardships. Others were more aggressive, questioning my motives for adopting Jenny. One particularly venomous message accused me of manipulating a grieving mother. Jenny's hands trembled as she retrieved the phone. The strong young woman who had confronted Izzy was faltering under the relentless assault. I recognized the indicators from her teenage years, the way she tugged at her sleeves, how her breathing became shallow. We spent that evening altering her phone number and updating her social media privacy settings. I watched her delete message after message, each one eroding her confidence. By the time we finished, she appeared drained. The next morning, I discovered her in the kitchen at 5 a.m., laptop open, surrounded by legal documents. She had been researching fraud statutes and insurance law. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. When I suggested she forego classes, she shook her head resolutely. She would not permit Izzy to disrupt her life, but the disturbances persisted. A process server appeared at my office with papers. Izzy was disputing the adoption through a lawyer in Florida. My employer pulled me aside after the scene in the lobby. He reminded me of the company's policy regarding personal issues impacting work. The warning was unmistakable. That afternoon, Jenny's academic advisor called. Someone had contacted the institution, alleging Jenny had misrepresented herself as an orphan on her scholarship application. The advisor assured us the claim was baseless, but they were obligated to investigate. The stress was impacting Jenny's pre-med studies just before finals. I found myself obsessively checking locks. Every unexpected knock accelerated my heartbeat. The sense of security I had cultivated over 18 years felt precarious. One morning, I discovered someone had tampered with our mail. Nothing was missing, but everything was subtly out of place. Jenny began sleeping poorly again. I heard her pacing at night, checking windows. The nightmares from her childhood resurfaced. More than once, I found her curled up on the bathroom floor after a panic attack. The therapeutic techniques we had learned years ago became daily necessities. My work suffered. I missed deadlines while engaging with lawyers. My supervisor summoned me for another meeting. She enumerated my recent performance deficiencies. The empathy in her gaze did not soften the ultimatum, improve immediately, or face termination. 18 years of consistent work history meant nothing against recent setbacks. The financial strain intensified. Legal consultations depleted my checking account. The lawyer I retained demanded a retainer I could barely afford. Credit cards I had settled years prior crept back towards their limits. I began calculating which bills could be postponed. Jenny noticed the pressure. She offered to utilize her college savings, but I declined. She increased her work hours, returning home exhausted from double shifts. Her grades began to decline. The pre-med program she had diligently worked to enter sent warning letters regarding her attendance. 2 weeks after Izzy's visit, we received word that she had engaged a new legal team. High-powered attorneys from Miami specializing in adoption challenges. They filed motions in multiple jurisdictions. The simple restraining order was insufficient to halt legal proceedings. My lawyer explained the situation grimly. Contesting this would consume months, perhaps years. The cost would be astronomical. Even if we prevailed, the legal expenses would devastate us. He suggested a settlement. Perhaps Jenny could share a portion of the insurance money if it ever became available. Jenny refused. She spent hours constructing her case against Izzy. The investigator she had hired provided more evidence. Photographs of Izzy living lavishly in Costa Rica while we struggled, bank records revealing hidden accounts, proof of other schemes she had orchestrated over the years. But evidence did not cover legal fees. The university contacted us again. The investigation into Jenny's scholarship had broadened. Someone had supplied them with documents implying I had received payments for adopting Jenny. Complete fabrications, but they were compelled to investigate. Jenny's scholarship hung in the balance during final exam season. I began receiving calls at work, mostly hang-ups, but enough to impede my concentration. My desk phone would ring incessantly during important meetings. The calls were traced to various burner phones. My employer's patience thinned with each interruption. Jenny's investigator cautioned us that Izzy had connected with other individuals she had defrauded over the years. They were exchanging notes, possibly conspiring together. The investigator required additional funds to continue monitoring their communications, money we did not possess. One evening, I returned home to find Jenny surrounded by medical textbooks, weeping. She had failed a crucial examination. The professor offered a makeup, but the damage to her GPA was done. Her aspirations of medical school were slipping away due to the turmoil Izzy had created. The apartment felt increasingly confined each day. We constantly bumped into each other, both of us on edge. Minor annoyances escalated into larger disputes. Jenny snapped at me for hovering. I retorted about her leaving dishes in the sink. The stress fractured our usually robust relationship. My car began experiencing issues. The mechanic discovered sugar in the fuel tank. Coincidence, perhaps, but the repair bill was not. I commuted to work by bus, extending my travel time. Arriving late to meetings provided my employer with more leverage. Jenny's birthday approached with a sense of apprehension rather than celebration. We canceled the party plans. Neither of us felt inclined to celebrate. The insurance company dispatched letters concerning the investigation, each one more foreboding than the last. They alluded to potential criminal charges for anyone implicated in fraud. 3 nights before her birthday, I awoke to find Jenny absent. Her bed was empty, her phone left behind. Panic consumed me. I searched the apartment, the building, the neighborhood. I located her on the roof, seated perilously close to the edge. She was not contemplating anything drastic, she assured me, merely contemplating, reminiscing, wondering if Izzy was correct, if none of this would have transpired had she never been born. I held her as she sobbed, feeling the burden of my failure to shield her from this anguish. The following day, I made a resolution. I called in sick to work and drove to the bank. I possessed an old retirement account I had been accumulating. Not a substantial sum, but enough to make a difference. The penalty for early withdrawal was considerable, but Jenny's well-being superseded retirement aspirations. While I was away, Jenny received a visit from someone claiming to be Izzy's friend from Costa Rica. The woman spun narratives of Izzy's desperation, how she had been living in destitution, how the story of the wealthy husband was exaggerated. She implored Jenny to consider her biological mother's predicament. Jenny recorded the entire conversation. The woman inadvertently divulged specifics about Izzy's current whereabouts, her new schemes, her intentions to re-enter the country under another identity, information the authorities would find highly relevant. I am curious how a college student working part-time could finance continuous surveillance that even monitors online activities and international movements. The synchronized timing of these events feels orchestrated somehow, as if someone beyond just Izzy is pulling strings. However, pursuing this would entail further legal involvement and greater expenses. My employer telephoned while I was at the bank. "Do not bother returning," she stated. The disruptions, the absences, the performance issues, it was too much. 18 years with the company concluded with a phone call. The retirement withdrawal suddenly became more critical. I did not inform Jenny about losing my job, not yet. She carried enough burdens. Instead, I concentrated on her birthday preparations. I purchased a small cake and her preferred takeout. We would celebrate quietly, just the two of us, as we had so many times before. But the universe had not finished with us. The morning of Jenny's birthday, we awoke to find an eviction notice on our door. The landlord had received complaints about the constant disturbances, process servers, investigators, strange visitors. It was too much for the other tenants. We had 30 days to vacate. Jenny stared at the notice, then at me. All the resilience drained from her face. She resembled the shattered 15-year-old I had discovered after her attempt. The strong young woman who had confronted Izzy was crumbling under the sustained assault. I prepared her favorite breakfast while she showered. She emerged looking older than her 21 years. We ate in silence, both lost in our own thoughts. The birthday cake remained untouched on the counter. Neither of us possessed the energy for a false celebration. That afternoon, Jenny's investigator called with urgent news. Izzy was planning to return to the United States under a new identity. She had connected with a document forger in Miami. The objective was to establish a new life and pursue the insurance money from a different angle. Time was running out to thwart her, but stopping her demanded resources we lacked. The investigator required payment to continue surveillance. The lawyer needed funds to file new motions. The authorities required more evidence to act. Everything necessitated money we had already expended protecting ourselves. Jenny made a decision that broke my heart. She withdrew from the pre-med program. "Temporary," she said, "just until things stabilize." But we both understood the truth. Dreams deferred often became dreams denied. She accepted a full-time position at a medical clinic, filing papers instead of studying to become a physician. I immediately commenced job hunting, but references posed a problem. 18 years at one company meant limited contacts. My former employer, constrained by company policy, could only confirm employment dates. The circumstances of my departure hung unspoken over every application. We developed a siege mentality. Each day presented new challenges, legal documents to review, bills to manage, threats to counter. We navigated our routines like soldiers, constantly vigilant for the next assault. The effortless laughter we had shared for years became a distant memory. Jenny's investigators submitted one final report before we were compelled to cease paying him. Izzy had successfully obtained new identity documents. She was now Maria Santos, a widow from Venezuela seeking asylum. The elaborate backstory included fabricated children murdered by cartels, a poignant tale designed to elicit sympathy and access. The insurance company's investigation dragged on. They froze not only the fraudulent policy, but began questioning the legitimacy of Jenny's adoption. Every document we had filed 18 years ago came under scrutiny. The life we had constructed together was dissected by strangers seeking deception. My job search grew desperate. Entry-level positions rejected me as overqualified. Management roles sought recent experience I could not provide. Savings dwindled. Credit cards reached their limits. The retirement withdrawal vanished into legal fees and living expenses. The financial security I had spent 2 decades building evaporated in weeks. Jenny worked double shifts at the clinic, returning home exhausted. She would fall asleep over medical journals she studied in spare moments, clinging to aspirations of returning to school. I would cover her with a blanket and update the job application spreadsheet, both of us pretending tomorrow would be brighter. Then came the knock we had been dreading. Not Izzy this time, but a federal investigator. The insurance fraud case had expanded. They needed to interview us about the adoption, the death certificate, our knowledge of Izzy's plans. We were now witnesses, potentially suspects if we could not establish our innocence. The interview spanned hours. They interrogated every detail of that day 18 years ago. Why had I agreed so quickly to adopt? Had Izzy offered me money? Was I aware of the insurance policy? The implications heavily suggested I had been part of the scheme from the outset. Jenny faced graver accusations. They proposed she had known all along her mother was alive, that the confrontation was staged to establish innocence, that we had been collectively awaiting the insurance payout. Her evidence against Izzy became evidence of our own complicity in their perception. We retained a criminal defense attorney with funds we did not possess. He reviewed our case and delivered a harsh truth. Proving innocence was more arduous than proving guilt. The investigation could persist for years. Even if exonerated, the damage to our reputations would be permanent. The eviction deadline approached. Securing an apartment with no employment and a pending federal investigation proved impossible. Landlords conducted background checks and discovered the legal proceedings. Our applications were repeatedly rejected. The prospect of homelessness loomed closer each day. Jenny's health deteriorated. The stress triggered migraines that left her incapacitated. She missed work, jeopardizing the job that sustained us. I watched her diminish, becoming a mere shadow of the vibrant young woman she had been. The guilt of failing to shield her from this pain consumed me. One morning, I found her packing her belongings. She had made a decision without informing me. A cousin in Oregon had extended an offer of accommodation. She could transfer to a clinic there, start anew where Izzy could not locate her. The unspoken truth: she was departing to protect me from further harm. I assisted her in packing, both of us weeping. 18 years of constructing a life together, and Izzy had dismantled it in weeks. We sorted through photographs, deciding what she would take. The album she had given me remained with me. She said I needed the reminder of better times more than she did. The night before she left, we sat on the sofa one last time. The same sofa where a 3-year-old Jenny had eaten cheese crackers, where a teenage Jenny had cried through identity crises, where an adult Jenny had stood firm against her biological mother. Now it would go into storage with everything else we could not afford to keep. She departed on a rainy Tuesday morning. I drove her to the bus station in a borrowed vehicle. We embraced on the platform, promises to maintain contact feeling hollow. She boarded the bus, glancing back once, forcing a smile that did not reach her eyes. I watched until the bus disappeared, then sat in the car, sobbing. The apartment felt desolate without her. I slowly packed our possessions, each item a memory of better times. The eviction date arrived with nowhere to go. A friend from my former workplace offered her sofa temporarily. I accepted gratefully, pride long since abandoned. The legal proceedings continued without resolution. Izzy, now Maria Santos, had vanished again. The insurance company kept the money frozen indefinitely. The federal investigation expanded to include other policies, other potential frauds. We were minor participants in what became a larger case. I eventually found employment, part-time retail, a stark contrast to marketing management. It provided enough to contribute to my friend's rent and chip away at legal bills. I video called Jenny whenever possible, observing her reconstruct her life 3,000 miles away. She smiled more there, the distance from chaos aiding her recovery. But the damage was done. The family we had built was dispersed. The dreams we had nurtured were forsaken. The security we had created was shattered. All because one woman decided her desires superseded her daughter's existence. Late at night, resting on my friend's sofa, I contemplated choices. The choice to embrace a 3-year-old. The choice to persevere through challenging years. The choice to oppose Izzy. I would make the same decisions again, even knowing the cost. Because for 18 years, I had a daughter who chose me, too. The investigation lingered. Lawyers dispatched bills. Creditors telephoned relentlessly. But somewhere in Oregon, Jenny was working at a clinic, still aspiring to medical school. She sent images of her new life, hiking trails, coffee shops, a modest apartment she shared with roommates. Building again from nothing, but building nonetheless. I knew we would endure this separately for now. But with the bond Izzy attempted to sever still intact, the woman who gave birth to Jenny had caused immense destruction. Yet she could not obliterate the fundamental truth. I was Jenny's mother in every meaningful aspect. That would never change. No matter how many identities Izzy fabricated or how much turmoil she generated, the story was not over. Investigations would conclude. Legal matters would resolve. Someday, somehow, we would regain stability. But the core of our story, the part where we confronted the tempest together, had imparted a difficult lesson. Sometimes affection is insufficient to safeguard those we cherish from individuals who should have loved them first. The eviction deadline necessitated immediate decisions. I secured a studio apartment in a less desirable neighborhood, the only place that would accept someone with pending federal charges. The deposit exhausted my remaining savings. I relocated our essentials, while most belongings went to a storage unit I could not afford long-term. My friend assisted in transporting boxes in her pickup truck. We worked in weary silence, both understanding this was temporary survival, not true living. The new apartment smelled of stale cigarettes and featured bars on the windows. I meticulously cleaned it nonetheless, needing some semblance of control. Why did the investigator happen to possess all these details about Izzy's new identity as Maria Santos, with fabricated murdered children? Jenny called from Oregon that first night in the new dwelling. She described her cousin's spare room, the clinic job that barely covered expenses, the community college courses she had enrolled in to sustain her medical aspirations. Somehow, we avoided discussing the investigation or Izzy. The weight of unspoken fears hung between us. 2 weeks into the new apartment, I discovered Izzy had escalated her tactics. My new employer received anonymous complaints about hiring someone under federal investigation. The manager pulled me aside, explaining they could not risk the liability. Another job lost before I had even received my first paycheck. The storage unit sent an overdue notice. I had 72 hours before they auctioned our possessions. I spent a sleepless night sifting through what remained, retaining only absolute necessities, photo albums, important documents, a few sentimental items. Everything else had to go. I sold furniture on online marketplaces for whatever cash I could obtain. Buyers haggled over already low prices, sensing desperation. The sofa where Jenny and I had shared so many moments went to a college student for $50. Our dining table fetched $30. Each sale felt like losing another fragment of our shared life. Jenny wired me money from her meager savings when she learned of my predicament. I attempted to refuse, but she insisted, reminding me how I had sold everything for her treatment years ago. The role reversal stung. Parents were meant to provide for their children, not the reverse. The federal investigator called with more inquiries. They had uncovered discrepancies in Izzy's medical records from 18 years ago. The cancer diagnosis might have been fabricated as well. They required me to furnish any documents from that period. I searched through the few boxes I had kept, locating old receipts and adoption papers. My lawyer advised full cooperation. He explained that demonstrating I was another victim, not a co-conspirator, necessitated complete transparency. Every document, every memory, every detail had to be disclosed. The process felt like being stripped bare, my life dissected by strangers. A neighbor in the new building recognized me from news coverage of the insurance fraud case. Word spread rapidly. Other tenants avoided eye contact in the hallway. Someone slipped a note under my door, suggesting I relocate. The isolation felt stifling. I found work at a 24-hour diner, taking overnight shifts that others shunned. The pay was minimum wage plus tips, barely covering rent. I served coffee to insomniacs and early morning workers, grateful for the anonymity the darkness afforded. No one asked questions at 3 o'clock in the morning. Jenny's health improved with distance from the turmoil. She sent photographs of herself hiking, color returning to her cheeks. She had made friends at the clinic, commenced dating someone who was unaware of our situation. A part of me felt relieved she was constructing a life separate from the wreckage. Then Izzy resurfaced again, this time in Texas. The investigator called to inform me she had been arrested attempting to open bank accounts under her new identity. The elaborate Venezuelan widow narrative had unraveled when authorities linked her fingerprints to the Maria Gonzalez identity. The arrest triggered a cascade of legal developments. Izzy faced federal charges for insurance fraud, identity theft, and falsifying government documents. My lawyer explained this was favorable news for us. Her apprehension shifted the investigation's focus. We were clearly victims now, not accomplices. But vindication arrived with complications. Prosecutors desired my testimony regarding the adoption, Izzy's supposed death, and the years of raising Jenny. They needed to establish the pattern of deception. Reliving those memories in a courtroom felt like another violation. Jenny flew back for the trial preparation. We met at the prosecutor's office, seeing each other for the first time in months. She appeared healthier but older, the ordeal having aged us both prematurely. We embraced in the sterile conference room, no words adequate for what we had endured. The prosecutor guided us through what to anticipate. Izzy's defense would likely impugn our credibility, portraying us as willing participants who turned on her when convenient. We would need to remain calm, adhere to facts, and avoid emotional outbursts. The truth would speak for itself, she assured us. Izzy's lawyer contacted me directly despite the restraining order. He proposed a deal. If I declined to testify, Izzy would relinquish all claims to the insurance money. The temptation lasted precisely 3 seconds. I reported the contact to prosecutors immediately. Some prices were too high, even for financial relief. The trial date approached with escalating anxiety. I worked double shifts at the diner, saving for a suit appropriate for court. Jenny stayed with her cousin, unable to afford a hotel. We prepared our testimony separately, prosecutors warning us against coordinating stories. Local media picked up the story as the trial commenced. I avoided reporters by utilizing the courthouse's rear entrance. Inside, seeing Izzy in an orange jumpsuit felt surreal. She had lost weight, her designer attire replaced by standard issue. She stared at me with vacant eyes, no trace of the university friend I had once known. My testimony spanned 2 days. The prosecutor guided me through 18 years of sacrifice, establishing the emotional and financial toll of Izzy's deception. The defense attorney challenged every detail, suggesting I had known about the fraud, that I had benefited from having a daughter. I kept my responses factual, resisting the urge to defend my affection for Jenny. Jenny's testimony proved more impactful. She recounted the attempt to end her life, the identity crisis, the years of therapy. She explained how discovering her mother's betrayal had shattered her trust in everything. The courtroom fell silent as she detailed the cost of Izzy's choices. Izzy took the stand in her own defense. She depicted herself as a desperate mother who had made errors but never ceased loving her daughter. She asserted the insurance money was always intended for Jenny, that she had planned to return it eventually. The falsehoods flowed smoothly, rehearsed and refined. Under cross-examination, her narrative crumbled. Prosecutors presented evidence of her extravagant lifestyle in Costa Rica, the other schemes she had orchestrated, the calculated nature of her fraud. Bank records revealed she had spent hundreds of thousands while we struggled. The jury saw through her performance. The verdict came after 3 days of deliberation, guilty on all counts. Izzy faced up to 20 years in federal prison. As guards escorted her away, she glanced back once. No apology, no acknowledgement of harm caused, just empty eyes and the lingering specter of her old dramatic flair. Outside the courthouse, reporters encircled us. Jenny and I pushed through without comment. We had no desire to become part of the media narrative. This was not entertainment. It was our life, broken and slowly mending. The insurance company unfroze the policy after the conviction. Legal complexities meant the money would be tied up for months longer, but eventually Jenny would receive something. Not the full amount, but sufficient to resume her education. She spoke of returning to pre-med, her dreams deferred but not destroyed. I continued working at the diner while awaiting the official closure of the federal investigation. Background checks would reveal the case for years, making better employment challenging. But I had survived worse. We both had. Jenny returned to Oregon after the trial. We communicated more frequently now, the shared ordeal having reshaped our relationship once more. No longer merely mother and daughter, but survivors of the same tempest. She submitted applications to medical schools, resolute in reclaiming her future. 6 months after the verdict, I finally received a letter clearing me of any wrongdoing in the federal investigation. The relief felt hollow. Being officially innocent did not restore the job I had lost, the savings depleted, the stability destroyed. But it was a beginning. I relocated to a better apartment, still modest, but in a safer neighborhood. Gradually, I re-established basic stability. The overnight shifts became evening ones. Tips improved. I began saving again, small amounts, but consistent. The storage unit with our remaining belongings could finally be retrieved. Jenny gained acceptance to a medical school in California. Not Columbia, but a reputable program that offered financial aid. She called, weeping with joy. I wept too, recalling the shattered 15-year-old who had wished to perish. She had battled back from that darkness to reclaim her aspirations. The day she commenced classes, she sent me a photograph in her white coat. The caption read simply, "Thank you for believing in me when I could not believe in myself." I kept that photo by my bed, proof that affection could endure even the most profound betrayals. We saw each other when feasible, meeting halfway between Oregon and California. The effortless camaraderie we had once shared was scarred, but not severed. We forged new customs, careful to avoid triggering old traumas. Neither of us mentioned Izzy unless absolutely necessary. The insurance settlement finally materialized, reduced by legal fees, but still substantial. Jenny insisted on sharing it, settling my remaining debts and establishing an emergency fund. I accepted reluctantly, comprehending she needed to reciprocate as much as I had once needed to provide. Life settled into a new rhythm. Not the life we had planned, but one of resilience. I eventually found improved employment, utilizing skills that had atrophied but not vanished. Jenny excelled in medical school, channeling her trauma into empathy for patients. We healed in parallel, connected despite the distance. Sometimes I reflected on the moment Izzy appeared at my door with 3-year-old Jenny, how different things might have been had I declined. But observing my daughter save lives, witnessing her strength and compassion, I knew every sacrifice had been worthwhile. Izzy had given birth to Jenny, but we had given each other life. The scars lingered. Trust came harder now. Sleep sometimes brought nightmares of legal documents and eviction notices, but we had survived what should have annihilated us. That victory, quiet and deeply personal, mattered more than any courtroom verdict. Jenny graduated medical school with honors. I sat in the audience, now graying and worn from the journey, but proud beyond words. She dedicated her thesis to children who had lost parents, finding meaning in her own loss. As she walked across that stage, I saw not merely my daughter, but evidence that love could outlast even the cruelest betrayals. We embraced after the ceremony, both of us weeping. Around us, other families celebrated their own triumphs. No one knew our story, the price we had paid to reach this moment. That was acceptable. Some victories were too personal for public display. That evening, we dined at a small restaurant near campus. We discussed her residency plans, my new employment, ordinary topics that once seemed unattainable. The investigation was closed. Izzy was serving her sentence. The insurance money had funded a new beginning. We had found our way back to stability, scarred but whole. As we parted that night, Ginny hugged me tightly. She whispered, "Thank you." The same words she had uttered so many times over the years. I whispered them back. We had saved each other, mother and daughter by choice rather than by chance. That bond, tested by betrayal and fortified by survival, would endure whatever lay ahead.